Hey crafty crew, and welcome back. If you love the farmhouse look, you can get it on a budget with these 20 Dollar Tree DIYs. If you would like to become part of the crafty crew, all you have to do is click that subscribe button right below this video. For this project, we're going to be using two of Dollar Tree's 6 by 8 inch canvases, and I'm going to remove each of those staples using a heavy-duty staple remover. I have this listed in my Amazon store, and the link to that is in my description box below if you are interested. This just makes this very easy to lift those staples up, and then you can wiggle them out with your fingers, or if they're just a little bit difficult, like one side doesn't want to come up, you can just pull those up with some pliers. But this makes it really easy and quick to remove all of those staples, and then we can remove our canvases. I'm going to lightly sand where all of those staples were to knock down any of the rough edges so that I can fill this in with some wood filler. I like to use this plastic wood made by DAP. It is just a really wonderful wood filler. It has a nice creamy texture to it. It is very easy to go on, and it dries fairly quickly. You can find this at most of your home improvement stores, but I also have this listed in my Amazon store as well. So once that dries, you can just knock off any of the excess with a putty knife. And then I'm going to take my electric sander and go over all of the places that I added the wood filler, but I'm also going to go over the entire frame because some of these had some fairly rough edges to it, and I wanted to have a nice, smooth, clean surface, so this will look really high-end when we're finished. Now we're also going to be using two of Dollar Tree's wood plaques. This is the barcode in case you can't find it in your store. You may be able to order these online. They measure roughly 4 7/8 of an inch by 7 inches. And again, I'm going to go ahead, take these outside and use my electric sander because sometimes when you purchase these, where they have those routed edges are really rough, and I want it to be nice and smooth. So I'll do that for both of the plaques, and then I'll make sure to wipe them down to remove any of the sanding dust, as well as wipe those canvas frames down. Now we're going to flip our plaque over to the back side, and I'm measuring 1/4 of an inch from the edge, and I'm going to do that on both sides of the long side of the plaque. Then I'm going to turn it around and make those marks on the other side, again 1/4 of an inch from the edge. Then I'll lay the frame and line it up at the bottom where those markings are. Make sure I have the same amount of space on each side. Then I'm going to mark the outside corners at the bottom of the canvas frame. So you're just marking the bottom and then the outside corner on each end of the canvas frame. Then we're going to turn it around and do the exact same thing on the other side. So it should be looking something like this, and you'll have one on each corner. We'll do the exact same thing on the back of the other plaque. Then we're going to take some wood glue, and I'm using Gorilla Wood glue, and I'm going to apply this to the short end of the frame, and I'm going to do this in 3 little sections, leaving a space so that I'll be able to add some hot glue. The hot glue is just going to give me a temporary hold until that wood glue sets up. Now we can set our frame down exactly where our 2 marks are and press it firmly to make sure that hot glue adheres. So it should be looking like this. Then we're going to turn it around and add our other frame to the other side the exact same way. Just lining up those 2 outside corners with our marks. And don't worry about if the frames aren't completely straight at this time at the top, because we're going to fix that when we add our other plaque. So we're going to go ahead and add our wood glue and then our hot glue. And I made sure to add the hot glue to the outside corners as well, so I can make sure that I keep these frames very straight when I add it to our other plaque. And then you already have your markings on that plaque, so you know exactly where to line your 2 frames up. So it should be looking something like this. You'll want to go ahead and remove any of your glue strands or any excess glue that may have seeped through. And then because this is all wood, you could stain it or paint it whatever color you like. I'm going to use Waverly's Antique Wax. And I recommend if you use this or any kind of stain that you just do small sections at a time so that you'll be able to go back with a clean cloth and blend it in and remove any of the excess stain or wax. I'm going to do this for the entire piece, including the top and the bottom, and then set that to the side and let it dry. Now I'm going to use one of Dollar Tree's metal canisters, and I only need the bottom, not the top. This one measures about 2 inches. Now you could add a wood bead and then one of Dollar Tree's book rings to make a cute top, but I have this wood finial that I have in my craft room. This came from Hobby Lobby and I just have one left. So I'm going to add that to the bottom of that metal canister with some E6000. And once that glue dries, I'm going to give this a nice coat of matte black spray paint. Once that dries, I'm going to use the E6000 and attach this to the top of our lantern and let that glue set. And then you can add any of your favorite flowers or greenery. And then I'm going to add in a battery-operated LED candle. Now you have an inexpensive but gorgeous lantern to decorate your home with. One of these unfinished wood signs. They have one with the lighter center and the darker frame, and then they have one that has a lighter frame and a darker center. So for this project, we're going to use the one with the lighter center. It measures 9 1/4 inches by 11 3/4 of an inch. I'm using some black paint. I'm going to paint the outside of the frame as well as the front. I'm using a sponge brush to make sure I get nice, crisp lines all the way around. And to be consistent, once that dries, I'm going to flip it over and paint the wood part on the back side of the frame just to make it look like it came that way. I'm going to remove the hangers that already came on the sign. We'll set those aside, keep them. We might use them in the future on another DIY. Then I'll finish painting that up. Once it dries, we are using this beautiful sign that I found at Dollar General with the stacked farm animals. This was $2. It has a gorgeous faux leather hanger on there. We're going to very carefully remove that and save it because we're going to reuse it in this project. Now, Dollar General did have a couple of different farmhouse animal signs. This one measures 6 5/8 by 7 3/4. We're going to take our first sign and attach that faux leather hanger at the top. Make sure you attach it to the wood frame itself and not that MDF backing. I did make sure to find the center, and I'm going to secure that using my staple gun. This just gives it a much higher end look with this gorgeous hanger on there. Now we can attach our farmhouse animal sign to the center of our larger sign using some hot glue and remove any excess glue. It is a gorgeous high-end looking piece and no one will ever know that you only spent $3 on this. Using 2 of these Dollar Tree signs, they measure 15 3/4 of an inch by 5 5/8 of an inch. For each sign, we will remove the twine hanger from the back as well as the label. Then take some sandpaper and sand that down nice and smooth. On the front side, we're painting the frame itself with some black paint. and make sure to get the outside edges of the sign because you will be able to see that. It's going to give it a nice, clean, finished look, and it's going to hide any imperfections in the sign. We're using 2 of these ornament-shaped signs. I think this came from Family Dollar or Dollar General for $1, but I just found this in my craft stash. I'm going to remove the hanger as well as that label, and I had to use my hairdryer to loosen that glue up to get the label off. Sand everything down, flip it over, and this one has like a metal piece on the front. We're going to remove that and sand it down as well. You will need 2 of these for this project. I'm painting both of these with the same black paint. Make sure to get the outside edges as well as the back. Now these ornaments have a beautiful like faux shiplap look on the front. We're also going to be using 2 of Dollar Tree's metal plant brackets. Again, we're not going to be able to use the screws that came with these because they're too long, so you'll need some smaller screws for this project. Now, this is the shiplap look on the front. I want to make sure I attach my bracket to the back side, the flat side. So we're going to take that bracket and attach it where the little screw holes are and make sure that it is flush to the back of the ornament. So I'm just kind of using a level to make sure I get the bracket flush to the back so I can make my marks with my marker where the screws are going to go. I'm going to drill just a pilot hole. I do not want to go through the wood. I just want it to make it easier for me to add the screws in. To reinforce it a little more, since those screws are really short, I'm going to add some permanent heavy-duty glue, in this case E6000, to the bracket, and we're going to make sure that that long piece is flush to the back and add our screws in. The screws are just going to tighten it up, make sure that E6000 gets good adhesion and it's nice and flat to your ornament piece. Remove any excess glue. It should be looking like this. You're going to do the exact same thing with the other bracket and ornament sign. Now for our frame, I need to make a hanger, so I'm going to reuse the twine that came on it. But I highly recommend that you use a heavy-duty hanger like a sawtooth hanger because the brackets are a little heavy. I am actually just using like some hot glue, some staples to reinforce it, and even more hot glue. But again, I recommend a heavy-duty hanger for this. You could add the twine just as a decorative feature. To make sure that my hangers match perfectly, I just lined each sign next to each other to make sure that they're the same length and separated in the same distance. Now we can take our bracket with our ornament on there. We're going to attach it to the center of the sign. This sign makes it super easy since it has that faux shiplap. You know exactly where to place it. Since there aren't any screw holes available, we're going to make sure we add a good amount of the permanent glue, the E6000. Then we can place this directly on our sign. I also made sure to put some glue on the back side of that ornament and use some heavy clamps to clamp that in place to make sure that your glue adheres well to your sign. Let it set up overnight. Make sure the glue has completely cured. And we're doing the exact same thing with the other sign. Now to decorate these, you can use some battery-operated candles. I highly recommend battery, not real candles, because you know this is hanging on the wall. You don't want a fire hazard. And this is how it looks with the candles. But to give it an even more elevated look, you could use some of these Dollar Tree glass candle holders. Again, make sure that you use a battery-operated candle like this battery-operated Dollar Tree votive candle. And if you use this method to make your sconce, make sure to adhere your glass candle holder to that ornament piece using some permanent glue. These turned out absolutely gorgeous. You guys let me know if you like it better with the glass candle holder or with the plain battery operated candles. some wooden beads. I purchased mine from Amazon, and I have a link in my Amazon store, which is in my description box below if you are interested. We're going to be using two different sizes. The smaller one measures about 1 centimeter, and you'll need around 65 of those. The largest one measures about 2 centimeters, and you will need 4 of those. We're going to take a Ziploc bag and some white acrylic paint. We're just going to put a couple of squirts of paint inside of the Ziploc bag. Then we're going to add all of our beads. I didn't know exactly how many beads I was going to need in the beginning, so I end up adding the entire small bag and then about half of the other small bag. And I had a few left over. So since I have completed the project, I know that you'll need around 65 of those. You're going to want to close that up tightly and then swoosh it around, kind of squish it flat, and make sure all of your beads get some paint on them. Now this is going to be kind of a thick paint, and it's not going to be a full coverage, but that is what I was going for. I wanted to have a little bit of that natural wood peek through. Then you're going to go ahead and put your beads on a paper plate, and I didn't have one large enough, so I had to use 2 smaller ones because you don't want them to clump together. You want to shake them gently so that they each separate and they'll be able to dry thoroughly. And here I'll show you a close-up as to what I'm talking about, them not fully covering. If you want full coverage, you may need to add a little bit of water to thin your paint out. Now we're going to take 2 of these gorgeous signs from Dollar Tree. We're going to remove the hangers from the back. I'm going to use my heavy-duty staple lifter, which I have in my Amazon store as well, to remove those. And note, these beads are the exact same size as the ones that we're using for this project, so you could reuse these beads in the project, or that'll give you a better idea of about what size beads I'm using. Now, the outside edge has this raw MDF wood look, so I'm going to take that same white acrylic paint and a Dollar Tree sponge brush and go around the outside edge. Originally, I was trying to be very careful not to get it on the top, but I do end up painting the top since my white paint doesn't match it. We're going to go around the edge for both of the signs as well as the back. So I'm trying to be careful as I'm going around the back because I originally thought I only needed it on the edge, but I end up painting the entire back because you want it to have a nice finished look, and you could potentially see parts of this when the project is complete. We're going to paint the other side the exact same way. Once that dries, that's when I'm like, well, this paint does not match perfectly with the top, and I want everything to look cohesive and match. So I'm going to gently take that sponge brush and go around just the top rim of both of these signs, and then allow them to dry. Now, once they're dry, we are going to flip them over to the back side. So you're only using the one sign. We're going to flip that over, and we're going to glue each one of these beads to the outside rim. We're going to attach the next one right next to it. I'm not leaving any gaps. We're going to do that around the entire outside rim of the sign. And this is why I painted the back of the sign, is because you can see a little bit through in between each of these beads, and I want it to have a nice finished look. I'm going to use my hairdryer to remove any of those glue strands. Then we're going to take our other sign, and I'm going to make sure that they line up the way the grooves are on the sign, so that when we attach the two together, they're going to look the same at the top and the bottom. So we're going to flip them back over to the back side, so when I flip it over, they'll match. We're going to add a bead of hot glue around the outside edge, and you're going to want to do that fairly quickly so that the glue doesn't go ahead and set up before you attach the two pieces together. If you want to, you could definitely use a permanent glue, put that on there, and then clamp the pieces together until that sets up. So this is super beautiful just how it is, but I want to have some feet on mine, so that's why we're going to use those 4 larger beads. I'm going to go ahead and place those where I want them to be, and mine were about 6 inches apart. I'm going to hot glue each one of those down, and of course you could use a permanent glue if you like. And I think this project turned out absolutely gorgeous. But I would love to know what you guys think. I am using one of Dollar Tree's clear glass plates, and I'm going to use some rubbing alcohol to remove any of that glue residue from the sticker as well as any fingerprints so everything is clean. Allow that to dry before you apply any of your Mod Podge. For this particular project, I will be using a dishwasher Mod Podge. This is just something new I wanted to try out. I'm going to hold my plate over top of my fabric, and I'm using this gorgeous floral print. You want to leave enough excess around your plate so that you have enough fabric to work with. I have this lying on a piece of wax paper to protect my work surface, and we are applying the Mod Podge on the bottom of the plate, not the top. You do not want to get any Mod Podge on the top of the plate. Make sure you remove any of the clumps or excess. You don't want excessive amount of Mod Podge to pile up on your plate. Then place your fabric with the print side against the plate so you are pressing on the back side of the fabric here. Make sure you press so that everything will adhere to the plate itself. Now with this dishwasher Mod Podge, I found that it does not dry as quick as the regular Mod Podge, so you don't have to move super fast. But I do recommend that you use a soft, damp paintbrush to apply the Mod Podge. I started in the center and I am working my way out to the outside edges. This will help level out any of the wrinkles and make sure everything is nice and flat, especially on the edges where it may come up. You want to make sure that all of that is sealed. So just take your time, make sure you add a nice even layer, and then I go back over and make sure that I kind of blend all of my brush strokes out. To allow it to dry, I'm actually just going to put the lid back on my Mod Podge and set the plate directly on there. I let mine actually dry overnight, but I think you could just let it dry for a few hours. Once it's completely dry, we're going to take a pair of scissors and cut a slit, and then I'm going to flip this over. I'm holding the plate at an angle and my scissors at an angle to cut away all of the excess fabric. Once you have that cut off, if there are a few little places that you're not able to get close enough to, you can go back and trim those up. And I also like to check to make sure all of the edging adhered well to the plate, because if it didn't, you could add a little bit more Mod Podge to make sure that lays down. Mine adhered well all the way around, so now I'm going to add a second layer of Mod Podge to the fabric on the back side of the plate to seal it in and to give it an extra layer of protection. And although the dishwasher safe Mod Podge says that you can place this on the top shelf of your dishwasher, I likely will not do that. I'll just clean mine with a damp cloth. But now you have a food safe plate to serve cookies or your favorite treats, or you can use it to display in your home. Project, I am using an old set of drink coasters. They're pretty stained, but they have this nice cork backing to it. So if you don't have any old coasters lying around that you want to repurpose, you can get coasters at Dollar Tree, or they also have these signs that pop out and they're the same ceramic type feel. You could use those. Now, because mine are discolored and they have seen better days, I'm going to give the outside of each one of these a coat of white chalk paint, and then I'm going to paint the tops of them with 2 coats of white chalk paint because the fabric that I'm going to be using on these are a lighter color and I don't want the design of the coaster itself to peek through. So allow that to completely dry before we add our fabric. And I'm going to use some of that same gorgeous fabric that we used in our first project with these gorgeous flowers. I'm going to go ahead and place the coasters on there so that I'll be able to cut around them. And I want to leave enough excess for each one of the coasters. So you don't want to cut it too small, and it's okay if you have about a 1/2 inch on each side to play with. I'm going to attach this using some matte Mod Podge, but first I'm going to flip each one of my pieces of fabric down so that the pattern is facing my mat. Then I can add my layer of Mod Podge to each of the tops of the coasters. You want to put, again, a thick amount, but not an excessive amount. So I just like to make sure that I have enough on there, especially the edging where it can come up. And then I go over and get all my brush strokes even so there's no clumps or lumps underneath the fabric. We'll do that for all 4 of these. And by the time you get to the 4th one, the first one should be tacky enough that you're able to flip that over and make sure that it is flat and that there aren't any wrinkles in any of your fabric. And I just like to press the backing, then I can flip that over, press the fabric itself, really go over it and make sure everything has adhered and that I don't need to add any extra Mod Podge underneath. Then you can add a layer of Mod Podge on top of the fabric all the way around or all over the top of the coaster. And we'll do that for all 4. You let it set and let it dry, and the fabric will harden up enough that it will make it a lot easier for you to trim all of that excess fabric off. I'm going to trim mine with a pair of scissors, but you could also use a box blade or an X-Acto knife, whatever you feel comfortable with that will get you the closest cut to the coaster. So I found that just by holding the scissors at an angle as well as the coaster at an angle, it gets me a really close, clean cut. Do that for all 4 of your coasters, and then you're going to want to add a second layer of Mod Podge to seal these in to protect your fabric so that it doesn't fade, since you're going to be setting drinks on there that could potentially sweat and cause the coaster to get wet. I would wait about 72 hours before using them as coasters just to make sure that Mod Podge has cured. We're going to be using some of these wood slices from Dollar Tree. They're flat on both sides and they're cut at an angle. We're going to be using 16 pieces, and you will have a few left over. Save those for a project later on in today's video. I'm using an acrylic paint in the color Spiced Pumpkin, and I originally was trying to be very careful and only paint the top of each of these pieces. Then I decided I was going to go ahead and paint the sides as well. Now you could stain the sides with a wood stain or an antique wax. That would be really beautiful also, but I decided to go with just one color all the way around. We're also going to be using this sign from Dollar Tree. It measures 5 3/4 of an inch by 15 3/4 of an inch. I'm going to remove that hanger because we don't need that. And I have 10 wood slices set out and then 6 on the other side. We're going to lay those 10 wood slices in the center of the sign and pushing the angles underneath the previous row. I'm trying to keep everything centered, and once you have everything in place, you can go back and use some hot glue to glue each one of these down. So it's going to start at 1 at the bottom and then go 2, 3, and then the last row will have 4. Then we'll take those other 6, we're going to set those on top of these in the same way, pushing those angles underneath the previous row. Again, once you have all of those lined up and placed where you want them, you can go back and hot glue each one down. If you haven't guessed already, we are making a beautiful farmhouse carrot sign. I'm using some of this greenery from Hobby Lobby. It has gorgeous details on it. I'm going to cut 3 stems from that bundle down. We're going to tuck those right at the very top center of the carrot and then use some hot glue to hold that in place. Then we're going to create a bow by using a 6-inch piece of dark burlap. This came from Walmart, and a 10-inch piece of plaid ribbon from Dollar Tree. I'm going to fold that over and gather it in the center. Then I'll gather the burlap in the center, and we can place our plaid bow on top of our burlap. To hold them together, I'm going to use a piece of twine and tie that in the middle and double knot it. And then once we cut that excess twine off, we can hot glue our bow right to the top of our carrot and at the base of the greenery. I think this project turned out absolutely gorgeous, but I would love to know what you guys think. Two of Dollar Tree's egg signs as well as one of their bunnies. They are already pre-painted white and they have this gorgeous wood grain on the top of them. I'm using a Dollar Tree chip brush and some antique wax, and I'm going to go around all of the edging of the outline of the bunny as well as both of the eggs. And you can skip this part if you don't want the distressed look, but I think it just really gives it that gorgeous farmhouse feel and really brings out the outline of each of these. I'm going to take a 5-inch piece of dark burlap and a piece of buffalo check ribbon. I'm just going to overlap that in the center, pull the tails down, and then gather that burlap in the back. We're going to attach these together using a piece of twine and double knotting that on the back. Then I'll cut that excess twine off, and I'm going to dovetail the ends of each of the buffalo check ribbon by just folding that in half and cutting it at an angle. We'll do that for both of the tails, and then we're going to take 4 of Dollar Tree's tumbling tower pieces, and I'm going to paint the outside edges with white chalk paint. You don't need to paint the larger part on the top and the bottom, just the outside edges. We're going to use 2 of these signs from Dollar Tree, and I already love that it has this faux wood grain on the outside. I'm going to remove the hangers from the center, and we're going to glue the 2 of these together end to end. Then I'm going to take that same chip brush and some antique wax and go around all of the edging on the outside and in the middle where the 2 signs meet to help blend that in better so it doesn't look like 2 separate signs. It now looks like one. We're going to be placing an egg in each of the signs, and then the bunny's going to sit on the top in the center. So I'm going to place those down inside of the signs, line everything up, and then we can take our tumbling tower pieces. We're going to glue one under each of the ears and one on the back side of each of the feet. Then we can place our hot glue on our tumbling tower pieces and place that directly on top of the eggs. Now that we have everything lined up, we'll go back in and hot glue each of those eggs to the inside of the sign. Now, here I discovered, wow, I didn't even fill those holes in, so you may want to do that before you even put everything together. I'm going to go back and just add some hot glue and then wipe that so that it'll be flat. And then I'm going to touch it up with a little bit of paint. Now my paint is not the exact color of the sign, so once that paint dries, I'm going to take that antique wax, go back over and kind of blend that in so it is not as noticeable. Now we can take our bow that we previously made and glue that to the bunny. And you can decorate this in so many ways. I'm actually going to put some Spanish moss inside of each of the signs and then use some of Dollar Tree's smaller twine-wrapped carrots and place 3 on each side. You can glue these in, but mine set up perfectly. And I think this is absolutely gorgeous, and it is a very large piece. I am using a Dollar Tree Hurricane glass vase, but you could use a battery-operated LED candle. Whichever one you choose, you'll want to measure the diameter at the bottom. In this case, mine is 10 3/4 of an inch. I'm going to use a Dollar Tree square and some of their wood sticks. You're going to line the sticks up to make sure they're all flush at the bottom where the square is. And you'll want to do that until you get the diameter of your candle or vase. So I did make mine about 1/4 of an inch longer, so I used 11 inches. I again made sure everything was flush at the bottom, and I'm using some double-sided sticky tape. You'll place that about 3/4 of the way down on each of the sticks, press it down firmly, and make sure you get in between all of the grooves, kind of pushing that tape down in between every one of those sticks. This is going to make sure that they stay pretty close together. I did leave a little excess tape on there, so I made sure that it was going to fit all the way around my cylinder before I removed the back side of the sticky tape. Then I set the cylinder flush at the bottom and wrapped the wood sticks around. Then if you have any of the excess tape, you can tuck that down behind one of those wood pieces. Press it firmly, make sure everything adheres well. You can decorate this with some of these gorgeous florals from Temu, or I'm going to put a battery-operated LED candle in there, and this is a gorgeous piece to decorate your home with. We will be using some of Dollar Tree's rub-on transfers. I'm going to cut out the ones that I want to use for this project individually, and we're using one of Dollar Tree's house-shaped signs. If you've never used these before, you just peel the backing off, place your transfer where you want it to go. You're going to use something with a flat edge. You want to apply a good amount of pressure, but not too much where you're going to damage the surface. Then you'll peel that top piece back, and if the transfer doesn't want to stay on your surface, kind of use your fingernail and press and scrape those areas until it stays, and then just slowly peel the paper back. Now I chose to go ahead and add the flowers at the bottom and the center and cut each individual garden tool and watering can and flower and place those at the bottom. Now I did find that with these transfers, the ones with the very thin lines, they took a little bit more time to make sure they adhere to the surface, but some of the larger ones did great. Then I applied the sign itself for the Farm Fresh flowers in the center. Now because this sign has some grooves in it, I did make sure I take the flat edge and go in between those grooves, scraping so that the transfer will stay inside those grooves. Now you could leave it just like that, but I want to spruce the hanger up a bit, so I'm going to use some of these buffalo check and white beads. I purchased these from Amazon, and I have them linked in my Amazon store in my description box below if you are interested in those. I'm going to alternate between the white and the buffalo check and fill that hanger up, but make sure you leave enough space so that you can feed that through and tie a knot on the back. So once I get my knot tied, I will add a little bit of hot glue to secure that to make sure the hanger does not come through. And this was such an easy project, but I think it turned out absolutely beautiful. Project, we're using one of Dollar Tree's wood wreath forms and some of their Easter lilies. Now I'm going to use 6 of them, and they only have 5, so you will need one off of another bundle. I'm going to place these through the wreath form, and I'm going to put 3 at the bottom and then 3 at the top, and they're kind of going in opposite directions. Then I'm going to take the end pieces and tuck them down in the back of the wreath form, and that's going to hold everything in place. Now I found this burlap at Walmart, so I'm going to use a medium brown and then somewhat of like a white color. I'm going to cut down 2 pieces of the dark brown at 9 inches and 2 of the white at 7 inches. I'm going to gather them together in the middle, and I'm going to crisscross or have them go in the opposite direction for the 2 darker ones, then do the exact same thing with the 2 lighter ones, placing that on top. Then take a piece of twine and wrap that around from corner to corner, double knot that in the back, And then you'll take that twine and go in the opposite corners to make sure you have all of your burlap tied together. So you'll just flip it around to the opposite side, double knot that again in the front, and then you're going to pull your twine to the back so that we can use that to attach to our wreath form. So I just centered mine in between the flowers, double knotted it in the back, cut the excess off, and make sure you fluff your bow out real pretty. Then I'm using this wood cross. I found this at Family Dollar, but Dollar Tree does carry these. This is the barcode for Family Dollar if you are interested in that. It measures 9 inches by 5 3/4 of an inch. And I'm using antique wax and a sponge brush to just go over that raised portion on the outside of the cross, as well as the sides. I want to keep the center that neutral color that matches our wreath form. Once you have allowed the wax to dry, I'm going to flip it over, and on the back side at the top and the bottom, I'm going to glue 2 strands of twine so that I'll be able to attach the cross to the wreath form. I used the cool setting on my hairdryer to kind of speed that up and let that hot glue cool down. Then you can attach this on the opposite side of your bow and use your twine to wrap it and double knot it on the back at the top and the bottom to hold that in place. And I love how this one turned out, but I would love to know what you guys think. We are using one of Dollar Tree's metal pizza pans. Remove the paper from the front, but keep it because you will need that later on in the project. I'm going to paint mine with 2 thin coats of white chalk paint, allowing it to dry in between each coat. I'm also going to be using some of Dollar Tree's Chevron removable wallpaper. Because mine has a pattern, I made sure to make a mark in the very center of the paper. Then I'm going to use a piece of wood to set where my marks are so that when I place the paper that came on the pizza pan, I'll know exactly that it will line up where that line is in the front. Then I can trace out that piece of paper, remove the wood, flip it over, and trace the other side. So it's going to be somewhat like an odd-shaped circle. Then I'm going to cut this out with my scissors, and then I can cut it directly in the middle where I made those 2 marks on the back side so that we'll now have 2 separate pieces. I'm going to place them on the pizza pan without removing the backing. I want to make sure I have enough room in the center to add some letters. And since I don't have enough room, I'm going to cut that long edge for both pieces. I'm going to cut about 1/2 inch off of each one. Then I can adhere these to the front of the pizza pan by removing the backing and then pressing any kind of wrinkles or air bubbles out. I've laid a ruler on top of the pizza pan so that I can find the center so that I can place my center letter of the word first. And I'm using some Dollar Tree letter stickers. I like to work from the center outwards on each side to make sure I have the same amount of space between each letter. And I'm spelling the word welcome. Now we're going to make a bow, and I'm using some burlap ribbon. I cut this down to about 8 inches, and then I'm using some Dollar Tree satin white with some beautiful gold dots on it. I'm going to cut 4 strips of that, slightly smaller than the burlap. Then I'm going to dovetail the ends by folding each of the white ribbons in half and then folding the ends in half and cutting that at an angle. I'm going to cut the dovetailed ends on all 4 pieces of the white ribbon. You'll need a piece of twine. I'm going to gather the burlap ribbon in the center and pinch it, and then crisscross each one of the white ribbons on top of the burlap, pinching all of it in the middle. Then you can take your twine, Wrap that around, double knot it in the back, and cut your excess twine off. Make sure to fluff your bow out and separate your pieces, and then I decided to pull some extra strands at the end of the burlap ribbon off to give it more of a frayed look. I decided I wanted some greenery on my sign, so I'm using some stems off of a eucalyptus bundle from Walmart. I've already cut and bent them sort of in the shape of the sign, and I'm going to adhere them to the pizza pan using some hot glue. I'll add the bow right in the center, and now all we have left to do is make a hanger for the back. I'm going to use some twine, hot glue, and some small pieces of burlap ribbon. The burlap ribbon is going to help the ends of our twine stay in place and not come loose. And I absolutely love how this sign turned out, and I would love to know what you guys think. Using two of Walmart's round wood signs. They're around $1 a piece. Go ahead and remove the stickers and the staples. And then because the edging was rough, I lightly sanded that. We're also using one of Dollar Tree's bead wreath forms. I just want the beads, the stained beads, so I'm going to take the wreath form apart and then slide those beads off. Now we're going to do something really fun with these wood rounds. I'm using acrylic paint in the color Burnt Umber, and I'm going to paint one side, the edges, and then a little bit on the back side. Then we're going to take some Elmer's glue. We're going to apply a generous amount of glue on there and then spread it all over our piece of wood, including the edging. And while that glue is still wet, I'm going to take some white acrylic paint and go directly over top of the glue. So while that is still wet, once you have spread it out, I'm going to take my hairdryer on the high setting and go over it, and it forms the most beautiful crackled paint. So the more glue you apply, the deeper the cracks are. See, I applied a generous amount of glue on this one, and the next one I didn't apply as much glue, so it did not provide the deep, deep cracks that I wanted, but that's okay because this one's going to be on the bottom. You're really not going to see that one. Then I'm going to take one of these candle holders. Now this one came from Target last year, but Dollar Tree has candle holders too. And I'm going to use some truffle chalk paint because this is a non-porous surface, and I didn't think that the acrylic paint would really adhere to that well. So we're going to do the same technique by putting our darker paint on there, letting it dry, then applying our glue. While it's still wet, we'll add our white paint and then spread that mixture out. And while it is still wet, we'll take our hair dryer, of course, on the high setting, go around and just watch those gorgeous cracks form. So once everything has completely dried, and it does take several hours for that glue to dry, we're going to take some Gorilla Glue and we're going to glue our square beads on the back side of one of our forms. So this is going to be the bottom of my riser. So that's why I wasn't too worried about the crackle finish on the bottom. I like the one on the left the best, so I want that one to be on the top. And I love using this Gorilla Glue because it's going to give me time to move these beads around if I need to, because it takes a couple of hours for that to set. Then I'm going to apply some glue directly on top of the beads, but I'm kind of keeping it closer to the inside so you won't see the glue itself, even though it dries clear. You're going to set your other piece on top and then set something heavy on it and let it set for a couple of hours so that glue will set up. Then we're going to take our candle holder, we're going to put the Gorilla Glue on top of that, and then I'm going to place it on the bottom of my riser. Again, let it set for a couple of hours, and because I'm a little extra, I like to measure to make sure it was centered. But you could decorate this in so many different ways, and I love the way this crackle finish turned out. I planter, I'm going to be using this plastic bucket from Dollar Tree. It is an absolutely gorgeous color, so I will not be painting it. I want to keep it this beautiful sage green with the white inside. This one measures 7 3/4 of an inch high and around 9 3/4 of an inch across the top. Now, they do have several different colors at Dollar Tree, so you could purchase a different color or even spray paint it to the color of your choice. For the legs, I'm going to be using 3 of Dollar Tree's wood plunger handles. They have this nice rounded end, and then the end that you attach your plunger to will be the end that we're going to cut. Now, I've already removed my tags and sanded it down to remove all of that glue. I'm going to be using my miter saw, and I want a very slight angle on this, so I am cutting mine at a 15-degree angle. It is just very slight. And if you don't have a miter saw, you can use like the handheld saw with the miter box. I'm going to cut all 3 of these with the exact same angle, and I'm making sure to keep them all the exact same length. So once they're finished being cut, I'm going to flip my bucket over and hold them in place where the legs are pointed outwards. Once I have it where I want it to be, I'm going to make a mark with my marker, and then I'm just holding each one up to make sure it's going to look good so I can mark all 3 places. Now, mine is not going to look just like the inspiration piece, so I want to paint my legs white, and I'm using a semi-gloss white spray paint for this. Now, while that's drying, I'm going to pre-drill some holes with the smallest drill bit I have. This is going to prevent the plastic from cracking when I attach the pieces together. I'm also going to pre-drill in the center at the angled end of each one of those plunger handles. This is very important because when you add your screws to it, this is going to prevent that wood from splitting and again to keep your plastic from cracking or breaking. Now I'm going to use some small screws as well as some washers. I want the washers to be on the inside when I attach the screws to the wood piece to keep that plastic from splitting or breaking and making sure I can get a nice tight fit for the legs. I'm also going to reinforce it using some E6000 on the wood pieces to make sure they adhere well to the bottom of the bucket. So I went ahead and put all 3 of the screws in and kind of got them started where the end piece will come out just a little bit so I can line up that pre-drilled hole for the wood legs. And then I'm going to tighten that as tight as I can and add all 3 legs, making sure that they are pointing outwards from the bottom of the bucket. To make the tag for the front, I'm using some of Dollar Tree's faux leather. Now they have black, white, and a very dark brown. I'm choosing the white, and I'm going to cut that down to about 1 inch wide, and I started off with about 4 inches long. Then I'll put the 2 end pieces together and then just round those ends off. It's going to sort of look like a Band-Aid. Then I'll place a piece of painter's tape sticky side up and tape each of those ends down to my mat so that I can paint these half wood beads. Now you could use the ends of some tacks and clip the pieces off. I didn't have any, so I'm going to use these half round wood beads, and this celery chalk paint is the perfect match to the bucket. So once that dries, I'm going to attach that to our faux leather tag by adding a little bit of hot glue. Once I have lined them in place, I can glue those down, and then we can attach this to the front of our bucket. And again, I'm just going to attach that using some hot glue. Now, this project is complete, and you can fill it with one of your favorite plants or an artificial plant. This one measures 23.5 inches high and around 9 3/4 inch in diameter, and it cost around $5. I'm going to be using one of Dollar Tree's large wire baskets. It measures 9.06 inches in height and 9.06 inches in diameter. one of their smaller wire baskets, which measures 4.13 inches in height and 7.87 inches in diameter, and one of Dollar Tree's small clip cups. They have a couple of different sizes. This one is about 2 inches tall, and this is in the office section of Dollar Tree. You're going to need one large metal garden hook and one of the smaller metal garden hooks. These come 2 in a pack, but we will only need one for this project. We're going to take the clip cup as well as the smallest garden hook. We're going to drill a hole at the bottom of the clip cup, so I'm just making a mark off to the side. I'm going to set this up on some wood to protect my table. Once I drill the hole through, I'm going to flip it over and kind of make sure I push that metal back through so it's kind of nice and cleaned up. You just want the hole big enough to be able to stick this garden hook through. So we're going to stick it in through the bottom and then loop it around till it gets like the top sits inside of the cup. So it should look something like this. To hold it in place, I'm going to use some hot glue. And I'm just going to put that on the tip. I want to be able to keep it straight so that I'll be able to put more glue through the hole, because I drilled my hole just a little bit larger than the garden hook. So if you drill a little bit smaller hole, it will sit tightly. I'm going to fill in that hole with some hot glue. I'm going to do that on the inside as well as on the bottom to make sure I have a nice strong hole. Once my hot glue cools down, I'm going to cover that up with some black chalk paint. This is going to give it a nice finished look, and it's going to look like weld marks, so where the two pieces are welded together rather than glued. So I'm going to do that on the bottom as well as in the inside where I have glued all of the pieces together. And this is going to be the spout for our watering can. Now my watering can is not going to look exactly like our inspiration piece, but it's going to be somewhat similar. So we're going to set that to the side. We're going to take the largest wire basket and the smaller wire basket. We're going to flip the largest one over and set the smallest one on top of the bottom of that basket. Then we're going to take that large garden hook. You want the largest hook part at the top and the smaller hook towards the bottom. So I'm going to feed this through the outside of the bottom wire basket and then feed it back through at the bottom. So it's about 5 holes up from the bottom. And then the top one, we're going to feed that piece through, and it's about 3 holes up from the bottom of the smallest basket. I'm going to secure that with some E6000 between the two baskets to make sure I get a nice hold around that rim, and then to reinforce it, I'm going to add in a few zip ties. So I'm trying to be meticulous about how I place the zip ties so that the little piece where the two connect are inside of that smaller basket and that I can kind of twist them around to hide them a little bit. I'm going to do that on one side and then I will do it on the other side. So I end up adding about 3 zip ties between the top basket and the bottom basket, and make sure you go back and cut off your excess zip tie. Now we're going to take our spout. We're going to feed that hook through the bottom basket on the opposite side of our handle, and then we'll feed it up through the top basket. And depending on how far you want the spout to stick out, will determine how far you want to put the hook in at the bottom of the basket. Now we'll go back and make sure that we secure all of our hooks with some zip ties. I'm going to make sure to add one at the top basket as well as the bottom basket. Again, I'm trying to make sure that I am meticulous about how I place these so that I can turn those tabs to places where you can't see them. I'm going to add a zip tie to that top largest garden hook as well as the bottom part of it. And if you want yours to look more like the inspiration piece, you could always paint it, but I love the way it looks all black, so I'm going to leave mine just as is. I am going to set a plant down in the top basket, and to disguise the hook in the spout, I'm going to add a little bit of greenery. we're using 2 of these Dollar Tree signs. Now, they are already super cute, but we can enhance them just a little bit. I'm going to remove each of the raffia bows and then try to separate the 2 pumpkins without breaking it. I started off with my Cricut spatula. I wasn't quite sure if it was nailed together, but it turns out it was just glued, and it is really easy to pull those 2 pieces apart. And I'm going to do the exact same thing for the other sign. Now, I was fortunate enough that the paper on mine came off very easily. So you want to remove the paper from the 2 larger pumpkins and make sure you have a nice smooth surface to work with. We're going to take some Mod Podge and apply a layer on top of the 2 largest pumpkins. Really emphasize on the edges, but you want to make sure that you have the entire top of the sign covered with 1 layer, and then let that fully dry. We're going to be using some gorgeous fabric from Dollar Tree. So we're going to use this orange with the white pumpkins on it. And then Dollar Tree also carries some buffalo check fabric. Now I have a scrap of like gingham print, but the buffalo check would be just as beautiful. Now that the Mod Podge has dried, lay your fabric on top of your sign and line up the design. Then place a piece of parchment paper on top of your fabric. And then you can use a household iron, or I'm using my mini heat press. I have it set on 375 degrees, and I'm going to go over the entire top part of that sign. Also making sure that I really emphasize on some of those edges. So it does not take long, but what this is doing is reactivating that Mod Podge so that your fabric will adhere to the sign. And it is going to be wrinkle-free and absolutely perfect. So once you have applied the heat to the entire part of the sign, you can test it to make sure that it has sealed just by lifting it up and making sure that the edges are sealed. So I'm going to set that to the side, let it cool off a little bit, and we're going to do the exact same thing on the other side with the beautiful orange fabric. Now that the Mod Podge has cooled down, we can trim that excess fabric off. I'm going to use this rotary blade. This came from Dollar Tree. This is going to give me a very close cut around the sign. Now for some of the more detailed areas, you can use a pair of scissors just to trim that fabric as close as you can. Then take a piece of fine grit sandpaper and go over the edges of it to give it a nice detailed finished look. We're going to do the exact same thing for the other sign. Now you could reattach the original raffia bows, but I want to reuse this small brown pumpkin, and I have some raffia in my craft room. This came from Amazon, and I will have that in my Amazon store if you guys are interested. This just matches that pumpkin a lot better. So I pulled off a nice long length and then folded it over in half twice. And then I'll cut the loops at the ends off, and then I'm just going to tie this around the stem of the pumpkin into a nice bow. And I am going to leave some of the length of my bow on there because I'm not sure how short I want to trim it just yet. Then we're going to take a square from Dollar Tree, and we're going to use this to line the bottom of each of our pumpkins up. Since this will be standing up, we want to make sure everything is even and that it will sit flat. And we're going to attach that beautiful small pumpkin right in the middle using some hot glue. Once I have that in place, then I can go back and trim off the tails of my bow to make sure that they are not covering up that beautiful center pumpkin. I thought it would be a beautiful addition to use one of Dollar Tree's burlap flower stickers to add right on top of that center pumpkin. Now, these stickers, the backing does come off very easily, so I'm going to attach mine using some hot glue. I think this piece turned out so beautiful, and I would love to know what you guys think. Here I'm showing you one from the fall and one for Halloween. I think for this project the Halloween shape will work better. So I'm going to remove the witch's hat from the pumpkin as well as the metal piece that's on the back and the hanger, and I'm also going to peel up all of the paper from the front of the sign. Luckily, all of this paper came off really easy. Now, to make the shape of our sign resemble more of our inspiration piece, we need to cut off some of these pieces at the top. So I'm just going to freehand and draw out the design to best resemble the one from Kirkland's. And for the window portion, I have this wood piece. This came from Hobby Lobby in a pack with different shaped wood designs. I'm going to use this to draw an outline, then flip it over and draw the outline on that side, and this will give us the perfect size and shape for the window. Now I'm going to set my sign on a cutting board and using a utility knife, score the lines that I've drawn about 3 or 4 times, and then you'll easily be able to pop off that extra piece. And if you have some extra, you can trim it up with your utility knife, but if you can't get all of it, don't worry about it. We're going to sand it later. Do the exact same thing on the other side. Now for the window, you will have to score that multiple times. I think I scored it about 10 times to make sure I got at least halfway through the sign, because you don't want to break it when you're trying to get that center piece out. So I just took the end of a hammer and I am actually very gently tapping this to break it right there at the outline, because I want to make sure I don't break the actual truck sign. And then once that pops out, if you have any extra, again, you can trim that up with your utility knife or use some sandpaper. So I'm going to go over everything with the sandpaper to make sure it's nice and smooth and there aren't any jagged edges. And I'm also going to take that sandpaper over the front of the sign to make sure that I have removed all that excess paper so our paint will have a nice smooth finish. Now I know our inspiration piece is navy, but I chose to paint mine with a black chalk paint because that better suits my decor. This will only take 1 coat, and I also made sure to paint the inside of the window as well as the entire outside edges of the sign. So while that's drying, we're going to take one of Dollar Tree's jumbo craft sticks. This one measures about 10 inches by 1 1/4 inch, and I'm going to give this 1 coat of white chalk paint. Let that dry. Now you can take your Cricut machine or your vinyl cutting machine and cut out a decal, or you could use Dollar Tree stickers. I'm going to freehand mine with an oil-based Sharpie marker, and we're just going to spell out Welcome Fall just like our inspiration piece. If you mess up, don't worry about it. You can just paint over it and start again. I'm going to dry brush some of that black chalk paint around the edging and then a little bit on top of the sign. This is not necessary, but I did want to have some of that distressed look on mine. Now we can attach this to our truck sign right where the original bumper is. So this is a perfect fit for each side. And see, I had originally started mine and I didn't have it in the center, so I did have to paint the back side and write it Welcome Fall again. We're going to attach that using some hot glue. And then to create the tail lights, grab a paintbrush that has a thick bottom, and then I'm using some red acrylic paint, and I'm going to dab the end of that paintbrush into my paint and then set this on top of the sign. Now, if you need to make those taillights a little larger than the bottom of your paintbrush, just twirl it around to make the size that you want. Now, you don't want too much extra paint because then it won't dry, but just enough so that it will give you that perfect circle, and then let that dry. So for our florals, I'm using this eucalyptus garland. This came from Dollar General and it was $3 and it was a lot longer. I've already used some of it on another project. So I'm going to cut about 18 inches, then fold it over in half, and then put a piece of floral wire, wrap that around the center to hold it together. I'm also using one of Dollar Tree's pumpkin filler picks, some of their eucalyptus stems, and some of their wheat stems, but I will remove all of the leaves off of those and only use the wheat portion. Take a piece of pool noodle, cut it down to about 4 inches, and then cut that in half. We're going to be attaching our eucalyptus to the center of the pool noodle. Now mine's a little bit too long, so I'm going to take one of the leaves and fold it over to the center. And on the other side, I will do the same thing. Then take a longer piece of floral wire, wrap this around your eucalyptus piece as well as the pool noodle, pull that tight, and then twist it together on the top. I like to, after I cut the excess wire off, use a pair of pliers to twist that really tightly and make sure it's secured, and also to tuck it down to make sure that you don't poke yourself or cut yourself with that floral wire. And this is how it should be looking on the back side. Just make sure that all of your leaves are facing forward and that most of the pool noodle is covered up. Then I'll add in a few stems of the eucalyptus. And as for the pumpkin filler, I am going to cut my stems off of the bundle and also pull the pumpkins from the stems. So I'm just going to add in the leaves right now, then add in a few of the wheat pieces, trying to make sure that I keep them evenly distributed on the outside. And for the pumpkins, I'll pull those extra pieces off and hot glue just the pumpkin directly on top of the styrofoam pool noodle. And as you're holding your pumpkin in place, just see if you need to twist some of your leaves around to make sure that it looks nice and full. And once you have this looking exactly the way you want it, always go back and check and make sure all of that pool noodle is covered up. Now we can add a hanger to our sign using a piece of twine. I'm just going to feed that through the holes that were already in the sign and then tie a knot on each side so that I can pull the knot to the back side of the sign and cut the excess twine off. Once you have completed your hanger, it is time to add our floral pieces to the front. I'm going to use a really good amount of Gorilla Hot Glue to attach this to the truck sign. And for around $7, you have a gorgeous fall decor piece. I'm going to start by using 3 of these styrofoam pumpkins from Dollar Tree. These are the ones that have the clips on the bottom. I've already removed all of the clips, and now I'm going to remove all of the stems. Then I'm going to take pieces of Dollar Tree barbecue skewers to insert into the bottom of each of these pumpkins to make it a lot easier for me to paint. I'm going to paint 2 of these with 2 coats of white chalk paint. And the third one, I will give that 2 coats of Waverly's chalk paint in the color Celery. Now, once these have dried, I'm going to take the paintbrush that I used for the Celery chalk paint, dip that into a little bit of water and wipe most of the excess water off, and then dab the paintbrush to create the celery colored speckles on the top of the white pumpkins. For the celery pumpkin, I watered down some black paint, and I'm doing the same thing. Now, once that dried, it was a little too dark for me, so I'm going to dry brush some celery paint over each of those speckles. Using a brown chalk paint in the color Truffle, I'm going to paint each one of the pumpkin stems to make them look more realistic and less like plastic. Then, using 3 of Dollar Tree's berry picks, remove the leaf from the pick. And because I want these to be white to match our inspiration piece, I'm going to paint over these with some white chalk paint. You could also spray paint these. I do find that it is easier if you saturate your brush with some water as well as the white paint and dab it into the berries. Let that side dry, then flip over and do the back side. Now, I found this beauty at Family Dollar for $5, but Dollar General also sells like some blank tobacco baskets for around $3. They're a little bit smaller than this one. This one measures 10 inches by 10 inches, and as beautiful as it is, I want to recreate that Kirkland's piece. So I'm going to remove all of the embellishments they have inside of the basket, and then the sign that it came with, I am going to paint that with one coat of white chalk paint. Now, one side of it was white, but it was a shiny white, and I want mine to be more of a matte finish. Then this is totally optional, but I am distressing the outside edges with some brown acrylic paint to kind of bring the outline of that out. And then I'm using one of Hobby Lobby's wood word cutouts. Because it was slightly smaller to fit in my basket, I decided to add it to the sign that was originally in the basket using some hot glue. Then we can place this back inside of the tobacco basket using some Gorilla Hot Glue. We'll set that to the side for a moment. I'm going to be using some of this eucalyptus garland from Dollar General. This long piece was $3. And I'm going to take that end piece and feed it through the left side of my basket and pull all of those leaves through, and then take that end piece and go through the opposite side of the basket and pull that more towards the back. Then I'll take that and fold it over to the side to double it up, so I'll cut that excess off. And this is the same eucalyptus that we used in the previous project, so it's a pretty long piece. Going above the original section on the tobacco basket, I'm going to pull the eucalyptus garland through and then pull some of the leaves through each of those sections and do that around from one side to the other. Then using some floral wire from Dollar Tree, I'm going to feed that through the back side of the basket and attach the eucalyptus strands to that. Once I tighten that up, I will wrap it around the tobacco basket again and then feed it through the other side and then push it through the wire piece that's already attached to the basket and tighten it up again. This is just going to give it some added security. Then I like to tuck the end piece in and push it down to make sure it's not going to scratch anything. For the loose strands in the front, take a piece of floral wire and feed that between the strand and the pieces in the tobacco basket, and do the same thing by twisting it, cutting the excess, and then tucking that end piece down. You'll do this in several areas to secure the eucalyptus to the basket, and then we can hot glue our pumpkins in. Make sure that you're hot gluing them to the actual basket and not just the leaf. And you can rearrange some of your leaves around to make sure that they're not covering up the sign at the top. If you need to see that you need to add a few more pieces of floral wire, then you can do so, and then hot glue your third pumpkin in. Then I like to add the berries to make sure I like the placement of them. Then I can flip it over, and on the back side, secure those stems to the basket as well. And then I do wrap that floral wire around each of the stems just to make sure that they are secure and they're not going to fall out. Then I'm going to roll the end of that in to tuck it to make sure that it's flat, and so that it will sit flat against your door or your wall. And I'm using some of Hobby Lobby's white flowers, but you could also use some of Dollar Tree's baby's breath. You could hot glue these in, but the stems were long enough that I could twist them around just like I did the berries and secure them in the back with some floral wire. Now all we have to do is create a hanger using some twine, and I'm going to feed the ends through the loop, double knot it at the end, and cut that excess twine off. We are using one of Dollar Tree's 14-inch wire wreath forms, as well as a roll of their burlap. Start on the back side of your wreath form. You do not even need to secure it down with any glue yet. Just hold it tightly as you wrap it around the wreath form. You want to wrap it around about halfway of each piece of burlap until you get the entire wreath form covered. This should only take one roll of burlap. However, I had an open pack, so I started using that pack, and I did run out before I got to the very end. I did secure the end of that with some hot glue. Make sure you do that on the back side so that you don't see it. Then you can start your new roll and continue to wrap it until you have the wreath form covered. Secure that last piece with some hot glue, and this will hold the original piece that you started with. Once you cut your excess burlap off, flip it back over so that the front is now facing you. I'm decorating this with some gorgeous pumpkin maple bushes from Dollar Tree. They have 2 miniature pumpkins as well as some berries. You may want to look over your picks before you buy them because a couple of mine did not have the berries on there. I guess they fell off. We're going to cut each of the stems from the bundles. For each of the picks with the pumpkins, I'm going to push the leaves upwards and then bend the pumpkin so that when I apply it to the wreath, it will sit up like this. I'm starting off with one set of leaves. You can pull the stems out of these and attach just the 2 leaves. I do find later on that it's just easier to cut the stems down shorter. They'll sit in there better. You can tuck these into where the ribbon overlaps and then secure it with a little bit of hot glue. I started off the first one with 2 of the leaves, then I add in my pumpkin stem, making the leaves on that stem have the colors on the opposite sides. Add a little bit of hot glue and push the ribbon down around the stem. Then we'll go to the next section where the ribbon overlaps and add in a couple of leaves. As I go through this, I'm going to twist the leaves around and make sure that they are kind of intertwined with each other. For each section of the wreath form, I'm adding a stem with 2 leaves, a stem with the pumpkin and 2 leaves, then a stem with 2 sets of 2 leaves, and I'll add another set with the pumpkin and 2 leaves. Then the stem with the berries. Now, if yours comes to a section where it doesn't overlap like mine did, where I had to add that extra burlap ribbon, the burlap is very forgiving. You can just push your stem directly through and add a little bit of hot glue to make sure it stays in place. This one section here is one of the Dollar Tree bundles. I did use 6 bundles in total. You'll continue to create your pattern until you have all of your bundles attached to your wreath form. Then go back in and twist and fluff out all of your leaves, and I used that 7th bundle if I saw any bare spots that I thought needed some more leaves or any extra pumpkins. I love the pastel colors in this wreath, and I think it turned out absolutely beautiful. You will need 2 of Dollar Tree's 12-inch honey plastic planters. You can find these in the Dollar Tree Plus section for $5 a piece. I also found these at Dollar General, but they wanted $10 a piece. I'm using my hairdryer to loosen the glue so that I'll be able to remove the labels. And I am using Loctite Premium. You can find this at Lowe's. You're also going to need some latex gloves. We're going to flip one of those planters over, and right there at that rim on the bottom, we're going to apply a really good amount of that Loctite. Then we'll set the second planter on top of that, and I'm going to put a 1-gallon paint can in there to give it some weight and make sure the 2 pieces adhere together. So while that glue is setting, I'm going to take this wood round I found at Lowe's for $8. It's 1 inch thick and it's 15 inches round. If you can't find these, you could also use a $5 pizza pan in the Plus section at Dollar Tree. I'm going to set these up on my little plastic triangles, and I have that listed in my Amazon store below in my description box if you're interested in those. It just makes it so much easier to paint. I'm using Men Wax in the color Espresso, and I am applying this with a sponge brush and then going over it with a lint-free cloth to blend it in and remove any of that excess stain. You'll do that for all sides, and once your glue has set up, we're going to attach that wood piece directly to the top of one of those planters using that same Loctite Premium. Just center that on top, apply some pressure, and allow that glue to set up. Then I'm going to flip it upside down, and to give it a little bit of a decorative accent, I'm going to add some nautical rope with that Loctite around the center. Not only is it going to be a nice decorative accent, it's also going to give us some extra support to hold those pieces together. Then I went back over it with a wet napkin to make sure I removed any of that excess glue that was on the planters, and you have a gorgeous patio side table for less than $20. I hope you enjoyed today's video and found tons of inspiration. And if you haven't done so already, I would love for you to click that subscribe button right below this video. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. Please take care, and I will see you guys next time.